Cool. I think we're ready to start, actually. So thanks for coming to this, everyone. We're really excited to get to talk to you guys. So just a little bit about us. We're all working on the same movie right now. It's called Identical Twins, and that should give you some key into what kind of movie it is. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be fun. It's a musical, and we're all working in different capacities on the film. My name is Victor Newmark. I'm the post supervisor on the film, and I'm also going to be leading the panel today. I've never led a panel today, but I've led conference calls, so hopefully it won't be too painful. I figure we'll start with kind of just introing everyone. We've got Larry Charles here, our director. And we've also got Corey Adelson, our producer. We've got Al Levine, our editor. We've got Marius DeVries and Carl St. Lucie, our composers. We've got Michelle Lawler, our cinematographer. So kind of spanning, production, post, producing, the whole gamut here. So I think what we should do is I'm going to ask questions to the panel for a bit, and then we'll turn it over to you guys to do a bit of a Q&A after that. So I figured I'd just start by asking everyone, what got you into film in the first place? What drew you to movies? Why did you want to do this? So I figure we'll just start with Larry.
Well, I mean, my father, both my parents were frustrated show business people in one way or another, and they were my father had been a failed actor and a failed comedian, and my mother sang and played the piano and made a record when she was a young girl, and they were very post World War II, very immersed in the best version of show business that ever probably existed. It was fun, it was glamorous, it was cool. My father was obsessed with Marlon Brando. And so he would actually quiz me rather than homework. He would quiz me on lines from movies. I was expected to memorize Public Enemy or something. He would then ask me questions about it at some point, And I think, and I was obsessed with television, and I couldn't watch enough television, and I wound up seeing a lot of cool stuff. And I kind of thought this was something, I didn't know what, but something that I wanted to do. I didn't know what in it I was going to do, but I thought, oh, this is a glamorous, cool world that I'm as far from as possible. How can I get there? And I'm still figuring that out, actually. In fact, I might have been in, and now I might be out again. So it's it's a weird journey.
It's cool. It's interesting that you still feel that way this deep into a career. That's a successful career that you're still feeling that way. That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, I don't feel that way. That's exactly the point. To me, it's all been pretty much failure, with a couple of exceptions.
Corey, same question. How did you get into this world?
I also had parents that were maybe less frustrated, but in the creative world, and they were producers, and I grew up in a household full of movies. So I just fell in love with movies, and I was almost raised by movies. And so that became my comfort zone and the place that I went to escape and be happy, and it continues to be that.
Mm-hmm. Al, how about you? How did you? What brought you to film and TV?
I think just the TV was my babysitter growing up, so I definitely got involved that way. Yeah, but it really was when I got a personal computer in 1993 in third grade, or maybe it was second grade, when I started having all these tools that I could play with, paintbrushes and stuff like that, and kind of expanding off of that. And then really seeing shows like South Park, where you could take cardboard, or you could kind of take with what you have in your house and kind of put something together and make it funny. So I really got involved online with animation and kind of taking my little camera out and bringing it back to the computer and putting stuff together and making short films. And I took that through high school where there was a broadcasting program and was able to use their equipment, and then eventually went to film school in the Midwest. But it was always this intersection between like storytelling and technology that kind of got me into it. And then of course my favorite babysitter, who I spent many great nights with.
Michelle, same question.
Well, I also watched an incredible amount of television as a kid. I still watch a lot of TV. My parents were not in the business at all, but I always kind of had a camera in my hand as a kid and as a young person. When I was in my early 20s, my girlfriend at the time was in a band, and they were going to go on tour, and I was going to be their roadie, and I decided that I was going to document the tour. And I brought a Super 8 camera, and I shot like 1 million rolls of Super 8 film. And when I came back, everything was just black or incredibly underexposed. It was a tragic experience. But I was like, I want to figure out how to do this. I went to film school, and I just have been making films ever since. But that was a good learning experience for me. Yeah. Now everything is exposed correctly. I hope.
Okay,
I don't know, Larry, you can tell me. I haven't seen the movie.
We'll have to talk after the Zoom call, Michelle.
Yeah, I finally figured it out.
Marius and Carl, I feel like it's maybe interesting asking y'all sort of the same question, but you're more on the music side. So did you always want to be doing music for film and TV, or did you start more in the music world and then go, come into
which one of us would you like to go first?
I'd say you go for it.
It was just music for me to start with. I was in my childhood, I was a singer. And then in my early teens, I started to become fascinated with synthesizers. And then, along with playing piano, I started playing electronic musical instruments at an interesting time in the development of electronic music. That led to me becoming a keyboard player and a session musician, and then a songwriter and a producer. And many years later, it was that a particular director came along and had heard some of the records I made and said, would you like to be involved in a film score? And it seemed like a good idea. But that was, that was after 10, maybe 15 years of just concentrating on music.
Well, you mentioned, let me ask a quick question of Marius also. I'm kind of curious. That's a very vivid era of music, rock music, popular music, electronic music. And were you also did your fashion reflect that as well? Like there was a lot of very flamboyant, now you're a very mundane dresser like I am, but I'm wondering if one time you kind of like were a little bit more, peacocky or feathery or, hair and a kind of a shag kind of a thing. Is that something if we found pictures we would see or?
Yeah. I was trying to grow my hair as long as school would allow me to, and that was a constant struggle. And then I remember for 1 year in my late teens, I wore only red for a whole year. I don't know if that answers your question, but I do have some photographs of that somewhere.
Yes, well, it makes me want to know more, but maybe we'll talk,
Can we do a sidebar on that one, Larry?
You could put them in the chat.
Perhaps we should circulate those photos to the group post this
we have to,
panel.
Very important.
Very educational. Carl, how about you?
Yeah, like
That
Marius,
question and the actual question.
yeah. I also was a musician to start. I was a pianist, very briefly a viola player and a singer. And I got to college for piano performance, and I realized that I fucking hated practicing. It just was not in my blood. And at the same time, I started doing like summer stock, Gilbert and Sullivan stuff as a vocalist. And I realized a friend introduced me to Sondheim's musicals. And I was like, oh, like musicals are like a great way to tell stories. They're a great way to explore character and to tell really interesting, like sophisticated stories about people. So yeah, I got into musical theater. I went to grad school for musical theater writing, and yeah, getting into film was I mean, I've always loved film. I was in a film club in college, and we made a music video for a big musical production number I wrote at one point, which was really cool. But it really wasn't on my mind. I've always wanted to be a theater composer, and in fact, that's kind of the origin of this piece, is that it was a stage show first, and I'm here because of Corey. So.
Well, I think that's a great like jump off point to sort of talk about musicals in general and what everyone here's relation to musicals is, because we're working on, you know, it's a musical film, it's based on a stage musical. I guess let's start with Larry again. Like, what is your relationship to musicals? Have you ever worked on a musical before, or what drew you to doing musicals?
Not to sidetrack you at all, but I wonder if we should, I'm happy to talk about that, but we have all these people like listening who I imagine they also have like questions, and we want to make sure we get to those, I think. So should we give them, should we give them the opportunity to start asking questions and tell us who they are and what they're doing here, you know?
I'm totally down to do that if you guys are. I was going to do a bit of panel and then do a Q&A afterwards, sort of after we've kind of talked a little bit more. But
well, I guess
Q&A
I don't
now.
need to throw a monkey wrench. I get, or maybe I do. I don't know. But but whatever you want, man. I mean, I was throwing that out as a suggestion. I don't know how everybody's listening is feeling, but I wonder if they're curious and they're only to get like a little bit of time.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't have, they're just like strangers to me, which is kind of weird. And so I think maybe it would be good to like at least know who they were, you know.
Okay. Well, how about this? If anyone has a question or wants to speak, throw it up in the chat, and then I'll call on you, and then we can kind of do it that way.
Cool.
And if you don't mind, Vic, just to give some context for everyone here, this is the Intro to Film Production class. So it's one of the early classes in the film program. And the instructor who teaches this class is Ulrich Roca, who's beside me on my Zoom, but I don't know where he is for you.
What school is this?
This is the Los Angeles Film School.
Okay, great. Got it. All right, cool. Hi.
So yes, if any students have questions, you can start throwing them in the chat. I mean, I'm going to throw a bunch in the chat. So if you guys don't go or you're shy, feel free.
I think yeah.
Go ahead. Just say while you think about that, I'll give you my quick answer to how I got into musicals, which is, I've only been, I wouldn't say I've been immersed in musicals like the way Carl is. Carl is truly very musical history savvy. I have a kind of a more of a idiosyncratic knowledge of the history of musicals because I mostly tie them up with comedy, you know? So my favorite musicals are really kind of combined, like Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, those kind of things that work both as comedies and had fantastic music. Even the Beatles movies, things like that, you know? A lot of those were directed by a guy named Richard Lester, who was an amazing director of his time and kind of created a lot of the style that we're still drawing from today. So anyway, that's sort of my approach to musicals.
And Landon Spicer, do you have a question for the panel?
I'm Landon Spicer. I was just wondering, what would be the biggest challenge? You got to write your own music and stuff like that. And I used to be an artist myself, and the biggest challenge of working with other people as an artist. So what's somebody who makes music comes and now has to do work with other people. As an artist, I feel like that could be challenging. What really is the challenge for you guys?
That seems like a good Carl question.
Carl, you kick off on that one.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge, I think that, I mean, my taste in musicals is very similar to Larry's. Like, I love I'm a vaudevillian, I think, at the end of the day, like in a strange sort of way. So, like, to me, musicals are extremely, like, it's very idiomatic, right? So there's just a lot of stuff that you have to nail in terms of like, you know, there's conventions like the I Want song. Like you have a protagonist that you're following through the story, and you need to know what that person wants, and then you go on a journey to figure out whether they get what they want or they don't, or their relationship to what they want changes. And so like tracking that is a little bit more overt, I think, in musicals than it is in, say, a regular screenplay. And I would say you're also thinking about stuff like pacing, right? Like, you know, we can't have too many fast songs. We can't have too many ballads in a row. Like, what style is appropriate for this character? Like, what is their range? Like, the biggest challenges are really in, yeah, putting on a show. I think, if that makes any sense. And also just like, yeah, I think that there's gosh, what, come back to me. I might have more thoughts.
You know, I was just gonna say though, Landon, based on what you were asking about was this collaboration. And I would say that collaboration is totally essential to any process where you're trying to make some sort of art that's reaching a mass audience, you know. There's almost nothing you could do that is by yourself, because even your interaction with the audience is somewhat of a collaboration also. But you need to make a movie, to make a musical. All of these people who are on this Zoom call, and like 100 more, are required to go through all the different permutations of what a mass media object needs to be completed, even on the most scaled down level. So you have to figure out what your tolerance level is for collaboration. And some collaborations, like the one we all just had, was transcendent. You know, we were all all those different ideas created an even better idea. You know, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes that's a possibility. Other times, no. There is like destructive, kind of toxic quality to it, and it winds up things up. You know, so it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that you have to be kind of like somewhat mentally ready to face. You know.
Yeah, and in musical theater in particular, like typically, you know, teams will work together, and a lot of those collaborations end up feeling like marriages. Like the process of developing a musical, even into like a stage show that's in production, can take years and years and years. Workshops, rehearsals, like out of town tryouts. I mean, you're really working very closely, like with one or two other people for a really long time.
Can you go into a little bit about the rehearsal process, both for a live stage version and also what the rehearsal process was like for this film? Carl.
Sure, I'll take it.
And then Mary, and then whoever else.
Yeah, so rehearsals. So again, like I come from a stage background where like everything is workshopped within an inch of its life for years and years and years before it goes out. And so I'm accustomed to, like, there's a whole format called the 29-hour reading where you get, you know, a music director, a piano, a bunch of music stands, and you work on teaching a show to actors over the course of 2 weeks, and then you kind of do a reading at table stand at music stands where people sing and they read, and you know, you get notes, and over the course of those 2 weeks, and you do rewrites, and then like, you know, maybe like 2 years later you do another one. This show was workshopped at UCB, you know, like that's kind of where it had its origin, but the rehearsal process took place after we did the screenplay was ready to go. We had written the songs, and so the rehearsal process was very fast compared to what I'm used to in a development process for a musical. But a lot of that was figuring out ranges, and because this is a comedy and the people involved are all TV comedy people, there was a lot of workshopping. And you know, I mean, Larry, you can talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure, but like, you know, a lot of it was, you know, punching up jokes and finding the right moments, and you know, making sure that that the movie had heart, and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was kind of like on the music side of things, we used that time to get our charts ready to go and to do pre-records of all the vocals before we went into production. So we were kind of finalizing all of the music at the same time, the actors were working with Larry and the dancer and the choreographers and all that sort of stuff.
The project was like in development for 8 years, and then it was shot in 20 days.
Yeah.
That basically
There you go. That's it.
The equation that defines movies.
Wait and hurry up.
Yeah.
I'm also kind of curious to hear from Al and Corey and Michelle, as far as like Larry, like you were saying, lots of different people have to all kind of come together and collaborate to make a movie, and in this case, a musical. Were there any sort of challenges or things that you were excited about that you were doing within your jobs, like specific to musicals? Like Al, had you ever cut a musical before?
I'd never cut a musical before, but I did a lot of musical theater in high school and kind of before that. And I'd always went to the theater and seen all the musicals. And I flew out to New York just to see Book of Mormon. So I was always a little obsessed with musicals. So I kind of knew maybe what I was getting into in a way. And you know what? And this is for like everybody who worked on the film, is like, I got this footage that was so good. I know it was shot in 20 days. But the script was so incredibly tight. It was one of the best scripts I had ever read. I can't write that. The music was so amazing. The performances were so good. The cut kind of like, I watched the footage and I was like, man, this is just kind of cutting itself. It was so solid from the get-go. I work on a lot of TV shows where the editor really, I have to help it out a lot. I have to find stories to take out or put back in, or different improv that make things go together, or record ADR lines to make something work. But the pacing and the music and the script, the dialogue, everything just worked out so well that my first cut kind of felt like, oh, this is the musical. Like let's just bring it up from here. Yeah, it was a very, very fun thing to put together.
I just want to say, there were so many challenges on this movie. We were dealing with puppets that we had to get built. And then it's like, what do the puppets look like? How do they move? Like, how do they feel? Like, just like really designing this thing that we were going to be looking at for, that had a lot of screen time. That was really new for me. And also, the music part of it was huge for me, but also like the choreography and figuring out, I had never shot a musical before. I've done like music videos, but I come from more of like a TV world, and like I'd never shot huge dance numbers, and on our first day of shooting, we shot our biggest dance number with Megan Thee Stallion, and that was our first day shooting. So trying to figure out, how to shoot the dance sequences with the music, and then also with puppets, it was that was a learning curve for me, and it was really fun. And just to speak to collaboration for a second, Larry is an incredible collaborator. He is so collaborative, and Larry also, for how much experience you have in the industry and how many things you've done, like I was just really, you're, always asking my opinion, always wanting to hear what I have to say, like really wanting everybody to have a voice in the room. And that's actually like kind of rare, I just was kind of just blown away by how collaborative you are. And you just really, led this huge project. This was a crazy thing to do in 20 days, it was bananas.
That's why
like, how was your movie? And I'm like, it was bananas. It was
crazy,
crazy and unhinged, and it was so fun. And I can't wait for people to see it. But there were just so many challenges. I learned a lot.
But there's a challenge in being like in a ship in the 19th century and crossing the ocean, but there's also something it's dangerous. It's risky. It could totally fail, but you're going to all have this kind of bonding experience over the journey. And if you live, you have that thing with you forever, really. This kind of life-changing experience, which we're all seeking in one way or another. And to be able to do that through a movie we're pretty lucky in that respect, I think.
Yeah, we all lived.
We all lived.
We did.
Well, post isn't over yet. We're still.
Yeah.
We discovered new worlds.
Don't speak too soon.
September.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we're still working.
I think John Funk had a question about sort of the greenlighting process and development process that maybe Corey can speak to a bit. John, do you want to jump in with your question? If you want to unmute yourself for a second.
Well, thank you for hello. Yeah, I just was curious. First of all, nice to meet everybody. Everybody's a star, and I love all of your work. I IMDb'd all of you, and you're all amazing artists. And I was wondering what the greenlight process was for this particular project. You know, how'd you get it financed? What was it like working with A24? And you know, how'd they get involved? Who'd you work with over there? Right.
Our green light process was interesting. I mean, I saw the show at UCB, as Larry said, like 8 years ago. It was the funniest thing I had ever seen in my life. These guys are brilliantly hilarious. They have such a unique voice. And when I brought it to Fox, which is obviously a really unusual home for this movie, we kind of said to them, basically, like, worst case scenario, you're investing in people who are going to have a huge career and who are the funniest people you've ever met. And, you know, best case scenario, you get a really original, cool musical out of this. And what's the harm? You know, they jumped in, we developed a script, they read the script, and it was clearly not a movie they were going to make. And then, you know, we were trying to find a home for it for about a year. We were sort of going to different places and just pitching it at every meeting I had. And an executive at A24, we had sent it to a junior executive there who is no longer there, but they shared it with Noah Sacco, who is now our executive over at A24. And he read it and just immediately understood the vision and understood the film and got it. He just understood why it was, you know, original and funny and all of the things you want out of a film. And then Larry came on, and with Larry, you know, we shaped the script in Larry's vision. And that was probably, Larry, what, like a year or something?
More, maybe even more. And also pre-COVID, which was a dynamic about everything as well, you know.
So Larry worked closely with the guys really to shape the script with them and to kind of turn it into a film that he wanted to make, and was incredibly collaborative with the guys, as Michelle said, and really like worked with them to bring out their voice too and to maintain and protect them. And, you know, through that process, we found a script that was excellent and turn that in. And then A24 tells us, you know, what the target budget is for them. And then we shot it for twice as much. And then it was still a really small budget. But truthfully, A24, when they came on, kind of knew they wanted to make the movie. So the process was really about just, you know, getting the script there and then finding the right team to bring this to life. And Marius was a big part of that. Michelle was a big part of that. You know, Carl was a big part of that. It's this whole team was sort of, it was bringing them together. And then it was also obviously casting the film and showing them that we had a cast that was exciting enough to bring out a theatrical audience. And once we got that together, it was a pretty swift and smooth process. And to tell you the truth, A24 was excellent and they gave us complete creative freedom. You know, they had suggestions, but never really imposed anything on us. And they were incredible partners.
And we had a question about pre-production from Alaric. Sorry, is it Alaric or Alaric?
Ulrich.
Alaric.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your question?
Well, this is my class. So we've been talking today about the importance of pre-production and coming in within a plan. And I just imagine that on a tight schedule of 20 days, immense pre-production and planning was required. So I'm just curious if you can talk to that process or or if you just winged it, like let me know how that was.
I think that you know, I worked the two women who were here, Corey and Michelle. I work with incredibly closely, as well as Josh and Aaron, the stars and writers of the movie. And so the answer is both, really. You know, we had to have a really tight, almost military regimented plan to pull this off. And yet at the same time, be open to the moment, you know, like shit happens and you can either make that into gold and be an alchemist, or you know, you can like lay in the mud, you know. And so that we made the decision again and again to embrace the moment, make the most of the moment within the context of, you know, a very tight plan. It's almost like jazz in a way, where there's a melody of some sort, but you can then, by having that melody, having that structure, you could then do these incredible solos and go off, because you know you're going to return to the place that you have to get back to.
Cool, thank you.
I think in an ideal world, we would have maybe had like another week of prep.
Yes.
Maybe, you think?
Yeah, but actually, wait, what did we originally had how many? We had 4 weeks for rehearsals originally. And,
Yeah.
Less, it was like 2.
but in the end, how many weeks of rehearsals did we have? Was it
Or ultimately,
2.5.
we were gonna right? We were originally gonna have 6.
we were shooting, you know, this was one of the things that we had to dialogue about quite a bit, you know, because this would also involve the actors and their feeling that they needed the time to prepare for these, you know, these very burdensome roles in some ways. And so there was this kind of a negotiation back and forth. We wound up at 4. So, and 4 kind of left, and I would have loved more time also on all levels. But the truth is that it kind of created inadvertently, to go back to your question, it created an urgency. You know, there was an urgency to making this movie. We couldn't fuck around. We had to keep going. And I think that you get that when you watch the movie. You know, I think you feel that urgency pop off the screen when you watch the movie. And that's an X factor that sometimes you get lucky with, and we got lucky this time with that, you know.
Does anyone else have any questions? From
Someone had asked about the process of developing music, like against book and stuff, and I did answer it, but I thought I might talk a little bit more about that. I mean, every musical is different, and I'm sure the same way that every film is different. Like, you know, each thing has its own needs. The way that I have always tended to work is that I tend to work with a property that already exists in most cases. Now, when I was in school, like I was developing a show with a collaborator. So I was doing music, they were doing book and lyrics. And so they were writing book material at the same time that I was starting to put together music. Now, there are some shows where the songs exist already, or, you know, there's musical ideas and then you hang words on them. Like, you know, West Side Story is a show, you know, Leonard Bernstein tended to write music and then have other people write lyrics in afterwards. But that's not at all been my experience. But yeah, it just depends on the team and what's needed.
And then Marley, you had a question, right, about the balance of music?
Yeah, I'm working on a project right now where music is such an integral part, not necessarily musical, but I'm also curious when you aren't working on musicals, that balance as well, for both. And then also, I think sometimes the restraint, where you could place a piece of music in something, but the absence of music might be more helpful. How do you find when it's becoming too much, or and how do you balance it?
That's a very important question for almost every movie that you make, but I wouldn't use the word restraint and this project in the same sentence. Excuse me, sorry.
That's very true, Mary.
Unrestrained.
This is not a very restrained movie, and our approach to the music is equally not very restrained. There's a lot of it, and it works. that way.
Yeah, what did you say to me, Larry, at one point? You said, I want to make sure that that the choices aren't too subtle. And I said, oh, there's nothing subtle about any of the choices.
Well, but I think that's what this movie needed, you know, and I think it's a case by case basis to some degree. You know, I think one of the things that everybody, all the creative people and all the people here plus more, all have as part of their personality are very strong instincts. And we kind of got into a mass trust of our instincts in terms of how far to go, how far to push. And all I have now in life is to trust my instincts, you know? And so I really do fall back on my instincts. If they are screaming at me, I'm pretty sure it's a worthwhile path to pursue, you know? And in this case, that's what dictated my choices, at least for the movie.
And as far as instincts go, do you feel like that's something you've always had, or something that you've developed over years and years of working on things?
I like to think that I have nothing and I'm starting from scratch all the time. And I don't want to make any assumptions because that's how you'll distort your instinct, you know? I want to try to be, this was a very new experience to me, but it also wound up being the best creative experience I ever had, you know? And that's because I was completely open to it and it fed me, it nourished the muse, you know? And that's unusual, you know? So I don't want to go in with any preconceived notions about anything. I don't want to throw my weight around or my experience around. I want to put everybody on the same level. I want to create an egalitarian workspace so that everybody's, you know, thought is valuable and different perspectives are going to make this better. You know, my only equation is what's going to make the movie better. And that's true with Al, the editor, as well. I want his input. I want his thoughts. I want to dialogue with him about these things because we're going to come up with a great answer, and we have.
Yeah, and something that and kind of back to the question, something that Larry and I have been playing with are, you know, peaks and valleys throughout the film. You can't have so much energy sustained for a huge amount of time without kind of going down a little bit. We're kind of taking a break. You kind of need a breather. And you know, we just screened this film the other day for Chernin, or one of our studios. And at the end of the film, everyone was like, oh my God, I'm like, this is insane. Like everything feels insane. But you know, Larry and I did build a lot of like kind of peaks and valleys into this thing. So the big moments feel really, really big, but the subtle moments, the smaller stuff feels a little bit, you know, you get some emotion in there. You start to feel for the characters. And you can't really do that if everything's at a 10, 10, 10 and there's music playing throughout the whole thing. You know, you kind of want those quiet moments. So then when the music comes back on, it's really, really big and you're blown away again. And I was really happy at the end of the film when we screened it, you know, for the first time for a small audience, that everybody had that reaction, because that was kind of the intention. And that's something that Larry and I had been talking about throughout this, you know, entire process of cutting the film.
Yeah, when I saw the stage piece that Corey's talking about, I think she and I felt the same about this. We could see it was a short piece at that point. It wasn't a full length. It was the two guys doing all the parts. It was brilliant, and it was hilarious, and it was one of a kind. But, you know, in trying to keep it true to that vibe and also let it become the movie that it needed to become without clinging to what it was, that required a lot of sloughing off on everybody's part so that we could do what's best for the piece of material, you know, and that everybody actually had good intentions and it worked out. And that's not always the case. You know, in this case, it was. Everybody's intentions were good and the same, essentially.
And I had a question for people that are looking to maybe break into the business and are looking to kind of get their foot in the door and get their first jobs. I wanted to turn it over to each of you and find out what you're looking for in someone that you would hire or bring onto your team, or like a new collaborator. Like Michelle, if you're going to hire a camera assistant, or Al, if you're looking for, you know, an assistant editor, you know, what type of people are you looking to hire? What, you know, and what are you not looking for? What would be a major red flag for someone looking to work with you?
I'm always looking for somebody who's technically good at their job, but also it really, for me, is about somebody that I really want to hang out with, you know, because it's like you spend an unreasonable amount of time with these people. You're under incredible stress with these people, and you are in the trenches with them essentially. So I'm always looking for people that are good at their jobs and I want to hang out with. And sometimes that's just about like personality, but also just people that are just kind, you know, like it's just it can be such a stressful job. Like I know we're not saving lives, but it can get really stressful. And I want people who are like just nice people to be with. Like the personality of it is important to me. People who are collaborative, people who, you know, it's about the rapport with me. It's just kind of like a feeling. Yeah. Having said that, like all the people that I work with over and over again, because we're all just like a tight crew, and we all have a shorthand. I think if you can find your people and have a shorthand, the work can also go a lot faster, you know?
I think that's really well said, Michelle. I think one of the things that's changed since I started doing this is that patriarchy, that hierarchy has been breaking down, you know, and that I find that really exciting, you know, and I think that's what you're talking about. I think that being open to the work experience, because we know so often the result is not, we don't have control over the final result of anything, but we could control this. We could have a good work experience and hope for the best, you know, and I think that's something that's like breaking down that traditional patriarchy. You're seeing the work experience be valued more on everybody's part. Everybody's more respected, you know, and that journey is as important, if not more important, than the ultimate destination, which often is out of our hands.
Yeah. Also, I'm as a DP, I'm very collaborative with my crew. Like I want their input. And I think for me, in terms of hiring people, it's really about like taste and finding people who have similar taste or taste that I can relate to. Because, you know, when you're talking about like Steadicam operators, like just have different intuitions and they have different taste, and it's like, and that's all fine, but like finding the people that kind of share your taste, I think is always something that I'm thinking about. Yeah.
I want to talk about this a little bit. As the person who has literally never been on a film before, one thing that I'm really grateful for in this process is that, you know, despite my lack of experience, like Larry, Marius, Corey, everyone like gave me a huge amount of latitude and a huge amount of creative freedom and a huge amount of, you know, I just felt good every day walking in. And, you know, I think one thing that I would say is that I think there's this notion that if you don't like get the career you want right away, because it's been 10 years since I graduated from grad school. Like I would say like there's also this sense in which like sometimes when an opportunity doesn't work out, it's like for the best, right? And so yeah, I echo what Michelle said. Like it's about finding the people who are on your wavelength, finding the people who are kind and fun to work with. Also people who are just willing to be in the shit with you. Like, you know, not just that it's stressful, but like, you know, the demands are they're just really intense, and having people that are just along for the ride and like, you know, willing to sort of put their body and mind on the line in the same way that you are is also like really, really huge. But yeah, also I think there is this way in which I think for in terms of just creative collaborators, one of the things that I think really worked for this project in terms of my relationship with Josh and Aaron is that they are not musical theater writers. Like they don't have the same training that I have. They're comedians, so they go for the joke. And like the interaction between my sensibility as someone who has like really strong instinct for craft around the musical theater elements and their really strong instinct for going for the joke, and the fact that we had like the exact same comedic sensibility. I mean, it made the original writing process for this, like it was the easiest thing I've ever written with other people. And I think that's true, that like, you know, not that all of this work is easy, but that sometimes, you know, one of the gifts is that when you find the right people, it's not nearly as hard as it could otherwise be, you know?
Yes.
I'll say for me, it's all about communication and post-production. There's a lot of small little files floating around everywhere. There's lots of media from set, lots of versions of songs, lots of my job basically is everything comes to me and my assistant editor, and we have to make sense of millions and millions of files that make no sense. So having somebody to work with that is easy to communicate, that more or less kind of gets it, that we can create, you know, a secondhand. My current assistant editor and I have been working on like, it's like our 6th or 7th show together, and we have a secondhand. I mean, he knows how to organize the media. He knows kind of what I'm going to do with it. I can kind of hand him stuff and I know what he's going to do with it. So, you know, communication and trust is really, really important. But, you know, that takes a while to build up. It's not something that you can kind of get like right out of film school. You kind of have to just kind of, you know, be in the shit for a little bit and make mistakes in order to get to that point where you can work with other people and, you know, there's trust all around. You know, that said, when I first came out to Los Angeles, not really knowing anybody, I had met this editor named Neil Mahoney, who Larry had worked with in the past, and he was kind of my mentor in a way, and he kind of helped me and introduced me to a lot of people, and more or less brought me to the position I'm currently in, and a lot of the other cool you know, shows that I've worked on in the past. And sadly he passed away last year, and you know, that really affected me in a big way. And something I thought about was there need to be more people like Neil Mahoney out there that are willing to take on people that don't have any experience, or people coming right out of film school, and want to help them get to a position of trust, or a position where a big movie or something like that will hire you. So I'm just putting this out there. If anybody wants to work in post-production, I would be more than willing to hop on a Zoom with you, meet with you, talk to you, and help you get into this, because it is a little bit difficult to get into, and you kind of just need one person to walk you through it. And I would be more than happy to talk to any of you privately about, you know, how to become a TV editor, film editor, if you want to do anything kind of within this bubble. So I'll put my information in the chat, and feel free to just email me separately if this is something you want to do.
And to Al's point, I mean, for me personally, when hiring our team, like, it's also about just people who want it, you know, like, you know, you can tell when people want it and when they don't care. And I think like people who care about what they do, people who really want it and who like need it in some way, I think like those are the people you want to work with. And it shines through in their work, and it comes through in when you speak to them about how they, you know, like, if you really want something, put your all into the meeting, like, don't half-ass it, really like prepare and think about it and have a point of view and have something to say, like all of those things. If you come to the table with those things, it shows, and you'd be surprised how few people do that.
100%. And I think some people get hung up on, oh, well, I don't know how to do this specific like element of this job yet. But it's like, no one is born knowing how to make a budget, or no, you know, or to like create a project in Premiere. You learn all that stuff. Like, what I feel like what I'm always looking for is someone who has a real desire to learn and wants to do a good job and is willing to, you know, work really hard to get there. And
there's a lot of faking it.
Someone who I can like talk to and isn't like a good hang too. That's always nice. And
yeah. There's a lot of faking it. I mean, sometimes you just have to take a job and you don't actually know what you're doing. I took a TV show. I didn't know Avid. I worked my ass off to learn Avid in, you know, 2 days. And then I got on the show and I messed it all up. And I think they knew. But yeah, you just kind of have to jump in and like start going at it and make friends, because if you're a lovely person to be around, if you like to smile and stuff, people will like you, and maybe you'll get more work just because you're cool to be around. I don't know. I'm not that cool to be around. I'm sorry, Larry.
I think you seem pretty cool.
Yeah, you're
Yeah, you're not bad.
Thanks. I'm fishing for compliments. I appreciate it.
I'm just curious, in this class, like, do people more want to be directors, or like what's sort of the breakdown of the class in terms of what people are going for? Or is it people finding it out? Or
I think a lot, I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, so feel free to, to jump in, but I feel like we have kind of a mix of directors and cinematographers mostly, but since this is their second class at the film school, a lot are still finding their feet and finding what they love.
cool.
Yeah, some people are responding in the chat box.
I'm Landon Spicer. I would say that I would want to do anything. I just want to make cool stuff, cool visuals, cool. So any way I can do it, whether I produce, whether I direct, whether I anything, I just like making fantasy worlds or real worlds that, you know, could be fantastical but true. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm aiming for.
I think that goes back to what Corey was saying. I think that your hunger and desire are a very important X factor. A lot of people fall by the wayside because they don't really have the hunger or desire, or which means the willingness to sacrifice, and also the ability to handle rejection. You know, the resilience to handle rejection is a key part of this. You're going to be told, if you are the most wildly successful person in the world, and I've known a few of them, they've all been told they're pieces of shit somewhere. And they were like, no, I'm not. I'm going to keep, or whether I am or not, I'm going to keep going. And so if you can deal with people telling you you're a piece of shit and still somehow inside of yourself believing that it's worthy to go on, that's a big part of it, because a lot of super talented people can't handle that psychological part of it and fall by the wayside, sadly, you know? So I think that's an important thing to remember. There is that human drama that you're playing out. You know, what can you take? You know, what are you willing to sacrifice? How much pain are you willing to endure to where you're going? You know?
Well, it's that, and it's also just like an ability to take feedback too. I
Yeah,
think.
totally.
Because I think, you know, another thing that I really loved about working with Josh and Aaron originally, and then again on the film with virtually everybody involved, is that like they have a willingness to just throw shit against the wall and see what works, and if it doesn't, you just toss it out. And like that has not been my experience on everything I've ever worked. Some people get very precious and very touchy about getting feedback because, you know, like the stuff we do is very close to who we are, I think, and it's very easy to take things personally. And but I you know, I've learned to really thrive on feedback, especially when I have such great collaborators. The feedback is good.
Yeah, there's feedback on all levels on these things, and you just have to learn how to look at the bigger picture. You know, look at what is the bigger note on the feed. If you get a note for something, which is feedback, right? What's the bigger note here? What do they really want to see? Because you're going to get feedback on every single level of this thing, from the original idea to the script to shooting, casting, to editing. You have to be able to take a note. And you have to be able to think around the note and try to find creative ways to deal with them. It's probably, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of the job is being able to take feedback, for sure. Definitely agree with that.
And knowing that like everyone is coming from someplace, you know, and even if the feedback doesn't align with where your vision is, then you have to think, well, what are they responding to? You know, holding on to your vision and saying, okay, I know that something about this makes sense, but obviously they're reacting to something, and trying to figure out what it is, you know, how to pinpoint what it is, and rather than dismissing, because you'll hear from a lot of people who probably won't know how to articulate their thoughts in a way that makes sense to you. And I think the amateur way to deal with that is to just say they're stupid. And the sort of intelligent way to deal with that is to kind of think about, well, maybe there's something, and maybe there's not. And maybe some people, there's nothing to what they're saying. It's coming from a totally different place, but at least give the benefit of the doubt to sort of exploring those thoughts and thinking like, is there something there? And if you get to the end of that route and there isn't, that's okay too. But you want to sort of lead with an open heart, if that makes sense.
I totally agree with you, Corey, but also sometimes people are stupid.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say
Also,
that.
people are stupid.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. I mean, you know, that design came from the original design came from feedback, and it needed to be scaled back a little bit, and they kind of landed in a good place. But you know, it can get you in a terrible
like
place.
sometimes it's totally off, but I think it's like it's having the the lack of ego to listen, absorb, and then decide whether it makes sense for you.
Yeah.
But at least come to a place where you're listening and absorbing and then deciding.
Of course.
I like not knowing, you know, I like to be surprised, both in what I'm shooting and the way I approach it. I like to be surprised. I know it's a good quality if I'm surprised. Something good has happened. So I'm very open to that part of the experience.
Actually, Vic, I have a question, actually, if we have time. Do we have time for me to ask?
Yeah, go for it.
So one thing that I think one thing that I've run into as a musical theater composer is that I often get paired with people who feel very unconfident in their ability to talk about music. So I'm curious for like Larry and Michelle and Al, like, you know, as people who are not doing music as your primary department, like how did you navigate that thing of like learning to sort of deal with music in a way that sort of is in film language? Do you know what I mean?
I think for myself, that I have been immersed in music and have been immersed in music both professionally and personally for long enough that I've kind of tried to think about music on a deep level, you know, and the impact that it has on me and why. And so I think I had enough kind of rudimentary understanding of why a song or a piece of music moved me or alienated me or whatever. I was also, like, you know, in junior high school, I played the drums in music class or whatever. So I got to learn a little bit of, you know, notation. You know, I just kind of like held on to enough that I had some sense of the structure of it and the language of it so that I could talk to someone like you, almost like my rudimentary French might get me by in Paris. My rudimentary music language got me by in my communications about the music with you and Marius, you know.
As an editor, we have to temp score a lot of things. So part of the skill set is watching, you know, films and listening to the music and being like, well, why did they use this rise in this moment? Or why did this crescendo here? Or why is this drum hitting at this moment? And kind of taking that stuff, thinking about it and applying it to whatever you're putting together. So, you know, studying a lot of film score, listening to a lot of film score, you know, just going down on Spotify and pulling things and trying them in your film, like that's taken me a long way. Now, actually talking about music the way that you talk about music, I have no idea how to do that. But I can trust my gut when I'm putting something together to at least sell it to a point. And it might not be exactly, you know, on tone with the film or whatever. It might not sound like something you and Marius would put together. But it could get us, you know, 10% there and you take it the next 90%. So at least there's something there to start with.
No, I agree. The temp music really is another way of communicating with Marius and with Carl, that it's like a mutual like sign language. You know, we all know this piece of music. We see how it works here. This is the vibe that we're looking for. I think it's a very clear form of communication between the music and the images, you know.
Yeah, so you splash in a Bernard Herrmann cue and say, I want something like this, but better.
Always better.
And I think for Michelle also, I'm curious about Michelle's take on it, because Michelle was really, we both were, you know, really into the music, and to the point that, you know, the crew led by us sometimes was singing along to the songs. So I'm curious about Michelle and her feeling about the shooting of the music, because it was a challenge and it was unique and something that was new to both of us. It was kind of exciting for that reason.
The songs just recently started to leave my everyday rotation in my brain, which I'm grateful for, and also I miss a couple of them.
And it's become my daily 100% of the time reality.
Nice. I'm sure it's still very present in your lives. Music is always helpful in whatever project because it kind of helps as a cinematographer give you sort of like the feeling and like the musicality of how the scene could move with the camera. And obviously with a musical, that's just, 100%. So I think the music was helpful in terms of like, figuring out just the feeling of the photography in those different scenes. The more complicated, again, aspect for me was the choreography, just because you have ensemble dance number and they're singing, but they're also communicating something with the song. So it's like, I think I just approached it, I approached it the same way I would approach like a really big ensemble, like complicated blocking scene. Like, where does the camera need to be when? And the music can kind of help you with that because you're like, oh, in this moment, we want to have a little flourish, or we want to like come back and really see how everyone's moving together. So, from the photography, I approached it like I would just a scene that is blocked with like 20 people, and like, what are the beats where the camera needs to be when? Was and also, like I said, we were originally gonna have 6 weeks of rehearsal, which would mostly be us like watching the dance rehearsals and the music rehearsals over and over, so you can really just kind of get it in your body and understand how it moves. And we did get several weeks of that, so we had the luxury of being able to watch the big ensemble dance number. I think we saw it like maybe 5 or 6 times, all the way through. So you can kind of, I would record it on my phone, and then we would go back to the office and we would watch it over and over and over and over and over again.
I think we created a shorthand for that process by having you videotape the numbers. Even while the numbers are being rehearsed, you and I are having a dialogue, we're talking about various things. We're walking around as the number is going on,
looking for different angles and being like, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we have the equipment? How do we do it? And so we're problem solving and finding aesthetic choices all in this kind of very compressed time, which gave it an intensity also, And then like Michelle said, we would go back and watch these things again and again and again and talk about these moments and talk about what we needed and what was essential. And really over a very short amount of condensed time, we created sequences, and that's how it worked. And again, I think you feel both the joy of the music, the exuberance of the music, and the urgency and intensity of the performances, which are very, very live,
Yeah, and from a production standpoint, like there's things that came up that I didn't think of, like, oh, we need to let the dancers rest, like if they, you have this insane schedule where you have to be done with the scene in 4 hours, and it's like, but the dancers can't just keep going and going and going. Like they need to rest if they're like flipping through the air and doing like a tuck roll and it's crazy what they do. But you got to let them rest. And also like, just talking to Larry too, it's like, you don't want to burn out your actors when they're doing these like really long numbers where they're singing over and over again. And like a big learning curve for me too was like whether we were doing the pre-record or whether we were doing live, and figuring that stuff out takes time too. So it's like, there's all these things with a musical from a production standpoint that kind of like, you have to leave space for, you can't just like, barrel forward with reckless abandon. You have to kind of like let the set breathe for a second and kind of figure out what you're doing.
You have to be sensitive to all those things. It's so true. I mean, the actors can't be pushed beyond a certain point if you want to get great performances, when you're asking them to do everything that they can in every take, and the same thing with the dancers, as Michelle is saying, they're not robots, someday maybe they will be, but right now they're still human. and they need a break, and even like someone like Kenny, the Steadicam guy is carrying a massive amount of weight on his shoulder, You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of weight there's a lot of physical endurance that goes into something like this that you have to be also somewhat sensitive to.
From a musical standpoint, though, I think as a DP, it was helpful to listen to the songs a lot and hear how they evolved too. Like one day, Larry and I got to watch Nathan Lane and Megan Mullally sing, which was it? I'm Lonely.
Lonely.
And it was like just them singing in this room, and it was so beautiful.
We all cried. Everybody
seeing
cried.
them sing it, and just the two of them was so beautiful. And we were all passing the video around because me and Larry were watching it. We were just crying. It was so beautiful. But having those moments to be able to just kind of like let it all kind of wash over you kind of helps with the end result, I think.
Yeah, it helps you start to imagine what you should be shooting.
Yeah, because you can really feel the music like you would
Yeah.
feel a scene if you were blocking it out. So that's kind of special about musicals, I think. I still have that video. I should revisit.
Me too.
I think we're gonna wrap it up in a second. I just wanted to first of all say thanks for all the students for joining, and also for everyone on our side for coming and doing this. This is very cool. One last little bit, I just kind of wanted to get a sense of if you were kind of just entering the business and you know you were coming out of school or you were just starting in the industry, what's like just a little nugget of advice that you'd give yourself that maybe you didn't know then, maybe something you were worried about then that you maybe shouldn't have been, something like that?
I had no idea how to enter show business. I didn't know what to do. I was from Brooklyn.
Did we enter show business?
Yeah, I didn't even know what that meant. It seems silly. But I eventually, and also keep in mind, and this is going to play a role in your decisions, technology is constantly shifting. So what I did was I hand wrote jokes and went to the Comedy Store where I knew there were a lot of comedians and tried to sell them jokes because that was the only way I knew how to connect. You know, I would literally say, hey, you want to buy a joke, you know? But if I was starting today, quite honestly.
Larry, that's amazing that you did that.
Yeah, that's how a couple of cool comedians started buying my material. One of them got on a TV show and recommended me to be a writer on the TV show. Very lucky. But if I was starting now, I would be taking my iPhone and just shooting all kinds of shit. You know, I would be just going out, and whether I'm staging stuff or whether I'm shooting like, you know, nonfiction documentary things or just cool apps, whatever it is, that is something, that technology, I'm very envious of that technology at your fingertips so easily. It was not that easy to have that technology available to you when I was a kid. You know, if you know, a movie camera, even an 8mm Kodak Brownie movie camera was an expense for a lot of people, but not everybody's got a phone and everybody can video anything they want. And you can make cool shit and people can see it on YouTube or Instagram or whatever the social media is. That to me is like a direct connection to the audience. That's very cool. The same thing with your music. You can make your music and you can put it out there. And that's very, very cool. And that's to me the way to get started, because you'd be doing it, you know? You're not waiting for a gig, you know, have another gig, you know, that makes a little money for you, because that thing is very pure. That experience of shooting something and putting it out there, believe me, there are so many filters normally in mainstream entertainment to getting your idea all the way to the end. So here's a kind of a shortcut that allows you to have an idea, shoot it, and put it out to potentially millions of people, you know? So that to me is the thing to do. I can't imagine what else to do besides that.
Yeah.
Great.
I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, like for me, like I don't know that I've talked to you all about this, but like I mean, I was on the verge of just not doing any of this anymore. Like when this deal kind of came around, like I was trying to be a software developer after 10 years of just grinding and kind of not feeling like I was getting anywhere. So like I think the takeaway for me is like for one thing, like I'm really glad that I had like unconventional collaborators. Like I'm glad that I saw that opportunity. I also like when we started this, like no one was getting paid, you know, and there was a part of me that was like, is it really like, is it worth my time to like invest in like something that, you know, isn't going to pay me on the front end? And I think that that can often be like a really delicate balance, like deciding what you're going to, where you're going to like kind of volunteer your time for something. But I think that in this case, like I was drawn to them. Like they were just great collaborators, great friends, and I let that sort of guide the process of writing the original show with them. And I think that was really to the credit of this thing. And also like I feel very strongly that like if you have something good, like, you know, don't underestimate, you know, when it could be lucrative down the road, because you just really never know. But yeah, like I mean, keep making stuff, keep sharing stuff, like keep showing up to it, like. And I also like to some of my friends who have been grinding and haven't had an opportunity like this, like the thing that I say to them is like, you can quit and come back, like, you know what I mean? Like it's not as if having a life in this business is about just like 100% being on your like grind all the time. I mean, you have to be a human as well. Yeah, I don't know. I think just, yeah, what Larry said about making stuff, I think is really important.
I like that. Not like marrying your sense of self-worth to success in show business is probably good advice in general. Maybe it's it's never a straight path or, you know, a straight ladder for anyone. I think, you know, pretty much everyone I've met has been working in different parts of the industry and like sometimes pop out and then come back. You know, it's different for everyone, for sure.
Well, that goes back to what Larry was saying about resilience and being able to take not only criticism but failure, because there is very rarely a direct correlation between the quality of the work you do and how successful it is. Those are two very different things. And if your worth is coming, your sense of worth is coming from how successful the work you're doing is, you're on a very slippery slope. Whereas if your sense of worth is just satisfaction in the work itself, you're bulletproof.
Mm-hmm. Well, like to Landon's point, just wanting to do cool shit. You know, it's like
do cool shit.
If you're doing cool shit, you're probably in a good place. You know, whatever level it's at.
Yeah,
that's a good goal.
Yeah,
do cool shit. That's the takeaway.
You can't give up.
That was exactly what it was. Just want to make cool stuff. You know, just
let's get the
I think
t-shirts
that's the
made
goal of
now.
everyone on this call, probably.
Well, thanks so much for everyone for coming out, and this has been a treat. This has been great. And to actually, you know, I'm going to post my email in there as well. I'm going after Al's thing. If anyone needs any advice about anything.
Vic's also a director. He directed a film a couple of years ago that's fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon. Hit it up. But yeah, it's not a straight ladder. You can direct a film and you can work in post, and you know, especially in the indie world, you should be doing multiple things and diversifying your skill set. So yeah. But yeah, hit me up anytime. And thanks again to everyone for coming out. This has been awesome.
It was great to see all of those I haven't seen in a while. It was great to meet the rest of you, and good luck, everybody, and everything. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all so much.